Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of day you're watching this. Thank you for doing so. I'm Nelson, the founder of 360-Degree Ministries, where the love of Christ must come full circle. And this week, what we're going to do is we're going to continue on our one-shot series. Remember, we talked about this last week. You're not really doing the new unit right now. If you're looking for the new unit, that's April 26th. But grab a seat and listen up anyway, because the one-shots are actually kind of important too. So last week, we did a one-shot on forgiveness and what forgiveness looked like and what forgiveness was and what forgiveness was not. And we're going to do the same thing this week. What are we going to do with it this week? Faith. So this week I want to talk about what faith is and what faith is not. So when we talk about this, we talk about the typological examples in the Bible. So I want to define faith as I want to define faith as the fuel that allows us to endure to accomplish what God has commissioned us to do. Let me say it again. Faith is the fuel that allows us to endure to accomplish the things that God has called us to do. You look at the example of Abraham leading Abraham with Isaac. He had to have faith to offer his son on the sacrificial altar. You talk about Moses leading the people out of Egypt. You're talking about David slaying Goliath. None of those things was easy, but faith allowed them to endure. I mean, we're talking about Paul and all the whoopings he got in the New Testament for sharing Christ. That wasn't easy. He needed faith for him to endure. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Well, you can't get God's strength unless you have the faith to turn your stuff over to him. Now, I could end it right there if I wanted to. I won't do it. So what I want to talk about now is two things that God won't do as far as faith. Because the problem is that we often believe, there are circles that believe that you can speak something into existence and it just manifests and all kind of stuff like that. Ain't no change in God's mind. I love that these people have great faith. The faith is kind of misplaced. Now watch this here. A couple weeks ago on social media, I actually posted something. I'm going to say it here again. If we were to speak something into existence, that is only because it was God's will for it to happen in the first place. We can't change God's will. We can't change God's will. I was going to go to one of the scriptures, but I'll give you Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21 for homework. Because that scripture talks about the many plans in the mind of a man, but the will of God is the plan of God, the purpose of God is what will stand. So when we do it that way, we have to understand that we got a whole bunch of other plans, but God, like, we doing this. And oftentimes that just happens. So first of all, God not going outside of his will. And the second thing is that God not going to give us anything that he knows will make us rely on him less. If he knows it's going to make us rely on him less, he's not about to do it. In fact, oftentimes God will take stuff away from us to remind us that he is God and he is our source. Take a look at the book of Job, you don't believe me. But even when we talk about all these different things, perspective is great. And you shape good perspective by having faith. And sometimes words change circumstances, but God knew what was going to happen. He knew that statement was going to be made. He knew he was going to back up. In eternity past, he knew all the decisions that he was going to make. There wasn't no discernment, wasn't no deliberation. He just knew what he was going to do throughout the fullness of time all the way to the other end of eternity. So let's go to some more scripture. And by go to more, I mean go to any. So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 17. We're going to go to Matthew chapter 17. So Matthew chapter 17, we're going to go to verses 14 through 20. And this is Jesus healing the boy with the demon. And when he came into the crowd, A man came up to him and kneeling before him said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers terribly. For he often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. And Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Then his disciples came to Jesus privately and said, Why could we not cast it out? He said to them, Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like the grain of a mustard seed, you will say this to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. We have to understand that the circumstance was that Jesus knew that the disciples was going to fall short with that, but he had to prepare them for the time that he wasn't going to be there, because after Jesus ascended, the apostles are performing miracles left and right. Also, let me say this: the era of miracles is done, if you will, like the miraculous, all that miraculous stuff that is done. So that's not to say God will not provide providence and will not provide grace and provide mercy, because those are still very prevalent. Those still happen. Those are still tenets that will happen in our Christian walk. But the idea of miracles, so to speak, in the biblical sense, the age of miracles is done. But why couldn't the disciples have that faith of the mustard seed? Why couldn't the disciples have that kind of faith? What happened? It's the same thing that often happens to us when we ask for something and it doesn't manifest. It's not simply because we didn't have enough faith. It's that we didn't have enough faith in God's outcome. We tried to impose our own outcome. Oh, you don't believe me? Let's go back to the scripture. This time we're going to James chapter 4. We're going to James chapter 4. I'm going to read this and I'm going to go through my spiel, and then we're going to wrap up, because one shot. One. Let's see. There we go. Scripture is as follows. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose that there is no purpose that the scripture says he yearns jealously over the spirit that he has made to dwell in us, but he gives us more grace? Therefore, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. So, this is a prerequisite. This is a prerequisite. I ain't talking about basic grace, like a piano not falling on you is basic grace. I'm talking about when you in the trenches and you and God got to get tight and y'all got to get something done. This is for what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about in this is that only what we ask in God's will be answered. Only what we ask in God's will be answered. Which means that not only does the secret will have to be fulfilled, but as James chapter 4 indicates, the moral will has to be indicated. We got to be morally pure first, and then we got to go bump into the secret will, because we don't even the secret will can do things, because I'm sure Job didn't want his family to die, but it was God's secret will so that Job would lose everything so that God could turn around and restore him. Now, watch this here. Restoration may not look like what you want it to look like, but it is still the best thing for you. Let me run that back again. Let me recontextualize it. We often stereotype what prosperity looks like. We often stereotype what prosperity looks like, not just material prosperity, but we stereotype the intangible, the spiritual prosperity. We associate it with this hunky-dory life where nothing is wrong and We always can just beat up sin and we never struggle and all kind of stuff. That's not prosperity. Prosperity is, and I'm closing with this. Prosperity is understanding who God is and understanding that He is the source, and thus having the faith, because that's what we're talking about, necessary to endure in whatever circumstance that we are in for God to show up in His way. We done. The last of the one shots is coming up next week, and then the following week we're going to go ahead and just get started on that big old unit with the masculinity and femininity piece. So we done. I love you. Yeah, I love. Oh boy, I love each and every one of you, and there's nothing you can do about it. God bless you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another, and have a great weekend, folks.